In the forests of western Uganda, a research team spent months collecting chimpanzee urine. 85% of the samples came back positive for alcohol. Not a trace, not a rounding error. Levels that would get a person flagged. Nobody handed those chimps a drink. They were eating fruit off a branch. 10 pounds of it a day. And a lot of it had already started to turn, which works out to roughly 2 drinks a day. Every day, for a whole life. You have been told a story about this, that humans invented alcohol, that it's a habit we picked up somewhere, something we could put back down. That's not what happened. The real story is older than farming, older than people, older than fruit. Give me 15 minutes, and you will never see a glass of wine as a human invention again. Start about 100 million years ago, when flowering plants worked out a new trick. Sugar, fruit, soft, sweet, and built to be eaten so the seeds would travel. That was an enormous amount of free energy suddenly lying around on the forest floor. Everything that could eat sugar came for it. Bacteria, mold, and a single-celled fungus, yeast, which does something with sugar that almost nothing else bothers to do. Most microbes burn sugar cleanly and get everything out of it. Yeast refuses. Even with sugar to spare and air to breathe, it dumps most of that energy into a chemical it can't use yet. Ethanol. It makes it. It floods everything around it with the stuff. Then, once the sugar runs out, it comes back and eats the ethanol too. Make it, hoard it, drink it later. That's the whole strategy. The long-standing assumption was that this is chemical warfare. Ethanol kills the competition. It's a good story. It might even be partly right. Nobody has actually shown it. Yeast ferments when there's nothing to fight. Alone in a sterile flask, with no competitor in sight. So the most socially consequential chemical in human history exists because of a metabolic decision we still can't fully explain. And none of it had anything to do with us. There was nobody there to drink it. For roughly 90 million years, the world quietly made alcohol, and nothing wanted it. Then something climbed down out of the trees. About 10 million years ago, in the ancestor we share with chimpanzees and gorillas, one letter changed in one gene. That gene builds an enzyme sitting in your throat, your stomach, your gut lining. It's the first thing a drink meets on the way in. Before that change, the enzyme handled ethanol badly. After it, about 40 times better. 40 times, from a single swap. Mutations like that don't stick unless they're earning it. And the timing isn't a coincidence. That's the same stretch when our ancestors started living on the ground. Up in the canopy, you eat the fruit fresh, straight off the branch. Down on the ground, you eat what fell. And what falls has been sitting in the heat. It splits open. Yeast finds it. Fallen fruit is fermenting fruit. It's still food, it's just food with a chemical in it now. So the ape that could stomach it ate on the days the others went hungry. You are not descended from the ones who couldn't. There's a small animal in the rainforests of Malaysia that makes this point uncomfortably well. The pen-tailed tree shrew feeds on nectar from the Burton palm. That nectar ferments inside the flower bud, in the wild, up to almost 4% alcohol. Beer strength, growing on a tree. Nobody brewed it. For its body weight, one of these animals puts away the equivalent of 9 glasses of wine a night. Test its fur, and the alcohol markers come back at a level that in a person would look life-threatening. It shows nothing. No stumbling, no slowed reflexes. It just goes back the next night. Alcohol is not a human invention, and it was never a human problem alone. It's a very old food. What humans invented was a way to make more of it than the world would hand us. And we did it earlier than almost anyone expects. On the slopes of Mount Carmel in northern Israel, there's a cave called Rakafet. It's a graveyard. Around 30 people were buried there, laid on beds of flowering plants. 13,000 years ago, long before anyone in that landscape planted anything. The floor is pocked with about 100 holes cut straight into the bedrock, stone mortars, some of them deep enough to hold several gallons at once. Scrape the inside of those holes and you find starch, damaged in a very particular way. Grains soaked until it sprouted, then dried, then heated, then left alone with whatever yeast happened to be drifting in the air. That's malting, that's mashing, that's brewing. The same 3 steps a brewery runs today. These people had no farms, no pottery, no villages in the way we'd use the word. They were hunter-gatherers, and they were making beer for a funeral, not to get drunk in a field, to hold a ceremony for their dead. And that date is the part that quietly detonates everything else. 13,000 years ago is before agriculture. Not slightly before, meaningfully before. Which raises a question archaeologists have been arguing over since the 1950s. Did we start farming grain because we were hungry, or because we wanted to keep the feasts going? Bread is a reason to work a field for years. So is a party you can't hold without it. A few hundred miles north at Göbekli Tepe, people who also had no farms hauled multi-ton carved pillars into place. They built the oldest monumental site we know of. Then they buried it and scattered around it limestone troughs. Some of them hold well over 100 litres. Nobody carves a vessel that size for one family's dinner. The chemical evidence for beer there is thin and still argued about. The vessels aren't. Whatever was in them was meant to be passed around, in numbers, on purpose. Half a world east on a floodplain by the Yellow River, a village called Jiahu had its own version. 9,000 years ago, jars there held rice, honey and fruit, left to ferment together. Hawthorn, wild grape, beeswax still clinging to the inside of the clay, rice wine, mead and fruit wine, all in the same jar before anyone in China had written a word. 2 populations, thousands of miles apart. No contact, no shared recipe. Both arrive at the same answer. That happens when the answer was already lying there, waiting to be noticed. And for thousands of years, that's exactly where it stopped. Fermentation has a ceiling. Yeast poisons itself. Somewhere around 15%, the alcohol it makes kills the thing making it. Every drink in human history for 10,000 years was capped by that number. Then someone found the way around it, and they weren't looking for a drink. There's a word in Arabic, al-kul. It didn't mean anything you could drink. It meant a fine, dark powder, ground from stone that people painted around their eyes. That is the origin of the word on the label of every bottle you own. The connection is the method. To get that powder fine enough, you heated the mineral until it rose as vapor. Then you caught it coming back down. Drive off the pure parts with heat. Collect what returns. That process, not the powder, is what the word came to mean. The essence of a thing, its spirit. Which is why, to this day, you call a bottle of vodka a spirit. When alchemists in Europe heated wine and caught the vapor, they got something that had never existed. In Bologna, in the 13th century, a physician ran that vapor through a coiled tube wrapped in cold water, then ran the result through again, and again, and again. What came out the far end was around 90% pure. Nothing in nature is 90% alcohol. Nothing ever had been. They called it Aqua vitae, the water of life. And they meant that medically. This was a drug. It was prescribed. It was measured out in drops. Then the plague came through Europe, and a liquid that burned, warmed, and seemed to stop anything it touched from rotting looked a great deal like an answer. It wasn't. But by the time that was obvious, everybody had a still. Quick thing before the last stretch, because this is the part I want to hear about. If you had to guess which came first, farming or brewing, what would you have said before today? Put it in the comments. London, 1743. Grain is cheap and distilling is barely regulated. The city is drinking 2.2 gallons of gin per person per year. Counting children, counting people who never touched it. Roughly 6,000 places to buy it in one city. Parliament passed 8 separate acts in 22 years trying to shut it down. Most of them did nothing. This is the first time a society finds out what happens next. A body tuned for fermenting fruit, meeting a liquid engineered to be 90 proof. And it doesn't stop there. America, the 1920s. Alcohol is illegal. Bootleggers are stealing industrial alcohol and cleaning it back up to sell. So the government made industrial alcohol harder to clean. Chemists were ordered to add things: kerosene, benzene, mercury salts, formaldehyde, and up to 10% methanol, which blinds people and then kills them. The reasoning was that once word got out, nobody would drink it. People drank it anyway. By the time Prohibition ended, the estimates run to around 10,000 dead. A government so committed to stopping people drinking that it poisoned the supply. And still lost. Here's the strangest part, and it isn't historical at all. Almost every drug you can name works like a key in a lock. One target, one fit, one job. Alcohol doesn't have a lock. It's a tiny molecule, 2 carbons, and it doesn't grip tightly onto anything. It nudges dozens of things at once, weakly, and the sum of that is what you feel. Which is why a dose is measured in grams, not micrograms. By drug standards, you need a staggering amount of it. So we've been drinking this for 13,000 years, taxing it, banning it, building religions around it. And there is still no complete account of how it actually makes you drunk. The oldest drug we have is the one we can least explain. Go back to the chimps for a second. Nobody taught them. There's no still in the forest. No recipe, no ceremony. They eat what's ripe. What's ripe is slightly fermented. They always have. That's the baseline. That's what a body like yours was actually tuned for. A small, constant, unavoidable trickle arriving inside food. Everything after that is us adding leverage. The mortar concentrated it. The jar stored it. The coil purified it. The factory scaled it. Every step made the trickle a little less like the thing we evolved to survive. The molecule never changed. Our access to it did. So the story behind alcohol isn't the story of something we invented. It's the story of a chemical that was already here, made by a fungus 90 million years before us, for reasons that fungus still hasn't explained to anybody, and a species that found it, chased it, purified it, and never quite got out from under it. You didn't discover this. You inherited it.